Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this session of U.S. Artists International Professional Development Series. My name is Andrew Olness Olson, and I'm the Program Director International at Mid-Atlantic Arts. I'm a white man in my 30s with short-cut blonde hair, round brown glasses. I'm wearing a white dress shirt and a blue-gray sweater, and I'm sitting in front of a blank white wall. My pronouns are he, him, and as we get started, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Today's session is designed for early to mid-career dance makers looking to take their work abroad. You'll have a chance to hear some stories and lessons learned from our two guests who've recently made international touring a fairly significant part of their company's work. Before I introduce Ariel and Gaspard, I do have a few quick housekeeping items to go over. First, we do have closed captioning being provided. Thank you to our captioner. You can access the English captions by clicking the CC button in the menu on your Zoom window. And then I'm dropping in the chat right now a link where you can also get captions that have been translated into Spanish. We are also recording this session and we'll be making it available on YouTube later this week or early next week. A follow-up email will be sent to you with the video, as well as a link to a short survey about today's session that I'd really appreciate you taking a moment to fill out, as these kind of webinars and conversations are a new project that we're rolling out this fall. Next, if you do have questions at any point during the session, you can type them into the chat. We may answer them on the fly, or we'll wait until we get to the Q&A session of the call. Lastly, we did opt to hold this call as a Zoom meeting, and so would ask that you remain muted throughout the call until we get to the Q&A section when we have that opportunity for questions. After the Q&A, we will open up some breakout rooms for you to meet and connect with attendees in small groups and discuss a few prompts about international touring. I also want to say thank you to the Emily Paul Tremaine Foundation, who's making this series possible. So I'm very much looking forward to this conversation to hear about both of your work in the international space and both how you kind of first got into international touring and how it's impacted both of your work. So just an introduction, Ariel in 2008 founded an all-female contemporary dance company, Ariel Rivka Dance, in New Jersey, with the mission to champion female creatives through original choreography, commissioned music, and curated family and educational programming. Ariel's work has been presented worldwide, including Turkey, Italy, Portugal, France, Rwanda, and the UK. Gaspard Louis is the founder and artistic director of Gaspard&Dancers. Gaspard has performed and traveled worldwide with All Nations and Pilobolus Dance Theater, and collaborated on the choreography of 9 major dance works with Pilobolus. Gaspard formed his company in North Carolina in 2009, and they have performed in Armenia, Georgia, Romania, the Dominican Republic, and South Korea. So thank you both again for joining us today for this conversation. I really want to get started by learning about your background. As I understand it, both of your companies started touring within the last 5 or 6 years, international touring, that is. Something that I hear a lot from folks is, how do you get that first invitation to perform abroad? So I'm hoping you can tell me about how your company first started touring internationally. Do you recall a particular turning point or relationship that made your first tour possible? Gaspard, let's start with you.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I am Gaspard, the artistic director of Gaspard&Dancers from North Carolina. I met, well, it was a chance meeting of a choreographer who came to the American Dance Festival, and we started talking, and then in the midst of our conversations, she told me she was a choreographer. She was from Russia, and she was here. She was kind of like exploring things and experiencing the American Dance Festival. And then from that point on, we stay connected. Um, then a year later, she invited me to teach in Siberia, which is where she's from in Russia, at her festival. And then a year later, she invited the company to perform. So first, she wanted to see how we connect, how I teach before she can trust inviting the full company there. So I think from that point on, and after I went performing with the company, I met other presenters who were in attendance at the festival there. And that's sort of kind of like how it branches out for me. And then it's kind of stay connected and it's always bombarding them with information. So every time that I'm doing something, I would always keep them updated to make sure that we maintain that connection. It's kind of like spread out from there for me.
Thanks, Gaspard. What about you, Ariel? Does that kind of jive with your own experience, or could you just share what that point was? What made international touring possible for your company?
We had a private grant approach us with really looking at the strategic goals of the company and well, it was really still during the pandemic. What's our next step? What's going to get us out there and performing as much as possible? And it's kind of actually when I was talking to Andrew earlier, it's a little bit crazy that we decided to start touring like fall 2021 was when we started planning this because, it was pretty bad still. But we had done the APAP conference many, many times and nothing had really come out of that. It's funny, I just got an email about it the other day and I was like, no, I didn't do it last year and I'm not going to do it this year. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. Like, I think it is worthwhile and that's like a whole nother conversation. But in terms of like the connections that Gaspard was able to make at ADF, my first tour experience came from us just doing research on our own. And the company manager at the time, I think, was looking through Instagram at different international festivals, at fringe festivals, and came upon the festival in Turkey, in Istanbul Fringe Festival. And we applied and we got in and we were sort of like, okay, well, how are we going to make this happen? And that was really our first tour. And we brought 6 dancers with us. And it was just about 7 days, I think. That was our first real experience.
Right, yeah, it's interesting to hear the different directions that people can take to get into international touring. So you've both taken different pieces abroad several times. Sometimes that means performing your work in a context that's very different from what you and your dancers are used to or accustomed to, performing on the East Coast. So how do you prepare your company for touring in a new cultural or technical context? Um, Whoever wants to kick off on that one is free to take it.
I can go, Gaspar. I'll go first. I think the biggest thing is asking everybody to be flexible and understanding, because as much as we prepare in the studio for, okay, here's our tech time, here's the lighting plot we have, here's all of the plans. When you get there, especially when you're going from country to country, the culture, the understanding of time might not be the same as New York. And just having everybody be on the same page, like, okay, whatever it is, we're going to make it work. I'd also say something that started very early on when we were touring, even nationally, is we have a plan that when we get into this space, I start working with the tech team, the lighting designer, the stage manager, and the dancers start spacing immediately. And, one or two of them might be leading that part, but I'm not involved in that. And so we go there and we just see what the actual space is. Because again, no matter how much you're looking online for the dimensions, the type of flooring it is might be different. There might be a huge rake in the stage, which has happened a couple of times. They're not used to it. So they literally need to spend the time figuring out how to dance on a raked stage. That happened when we were in Bari, and as well as I think when we were in Madeira, Portugal. So I think asking people for that grace and understanding that we're all humans and that we have to sort of go with the flow, which can be really hard when you know you're performing. Like there's sort of that anxiety, excitement, but also anxiety about what's going on. And you want to make sure everyone's safe. But I do think assigning, okay, here's our plan when we go in, like you all work on what you need to do, and I'm going to work on what I need to do, and we'll confer as we go.
Yeah, but I will also add to that, always when you do your homework and no matter how well you think you prepared, there's always, something that may happen, especially when you're on the international stage. And I remember vividly when we were in Dominican Republic, so we thought everything was perfect, everything was rosy until we got there. And then I needed a site to project uh, for projection. And I was told everything was there until we got there. There was nothing there. So we went from theater to theater to try to borrow a site from a different place. And then finally, we got a beautiful big white curtain we use as a site. And then, just learn to be, you have to make yourself as flexible as you possibly can because, you're in a different country, different mentality, different way of doing things. And here in the US, we're accustomed to a certain way of life, and then it's different, particularly, if you're dealing with a third world country where things kind of like go on the fly and change very quickly. So you have to be able to be adaptable.
Yeah, it seems like that adaptability is really huge and key to be able to work on the fly and address problems as they show up. So I'd love to continue on in that vein, but kind of pivot to look at the kind of touring logistics specifically. I wonder if either of you or both of you have a story of an unexpected hurdle you encountered on a tour, whether that's around visas, travel logistics, budgets, and how you adapted to solve it. Or if you now have like a checklist of those kind of very specific logistical items that you make sure to go over every single tour.
Well, I kind of give an example of when I was in the Dominican Republic, where we thought we were gonna have the site to project or the pieces that I wanted to use a projector with, and then it just went all across the city trying to look for something to make it happen. We ended up, borrowing the sheets from another theater, which was not adequate, but yet sufficient enough where we made it work. Um, so that was one of the main things that I've encountered in terms of an obstacle. Um, Other than that, is sort of kind of like timing. We have the floor issue. There was another when we were in Belize, so they didn't have proper flooring. We ended up performing in a cement. They just put a Marley on a cement floor, which is when we got there, it was just like so. It was quite interesting to say the least. And so they didn't have a proper stage in terms of you have a wooden floor, Marley, sprung floor. None of that was there. So it was a concrete, just put a thing of Marley on it, and that was it. That was our stage.
What do you, Ariel?
Um, so I have a couple of things because, lots of things can go wrong. I would say like the first more scary one was that one of my dancers has a severe nut allergy. And again, I guess like I'm kind of more focused on like who they are as humans and remembering like when you're touring with people, it's not the same as when you're at home and you're just going to the theater, you're performing, that's it. Like you're living together. So to really think about all the needs that everyone has as a human. And she had to go to the emergency room, and the company manager at the time had, already prepared, knowing where the closest hospital was, how to get
Mhm.
there. But, and it was something that we tried to avoid. We did say at the restaurant, we have these allergies, but because of the language barrier, they just didn't understand or didn't consider certain things nuts in the way that we do. So, one thing is really making sure that there's certain words that when you're going abroad that are like extremely important besides bathroom. um, I would say also, this may sound silly, but like knowing where the closest like laundry is, because costumes like need to be washed. And something that I found on this most recent tour is that they would close at like 9 p.m. and they wouldn't open until 10 a.m. the next morning. So a few times we were leaving in the morning and we had a performance that didn't end. And then we have all these smelly costumes that we're traveling with, and the dancers need them for the next night. So, what do you do? And also, do they take credit card? And also some of these things like you can't figure out until you're there, but then it's like, okay, you have all these people who are like, well, why aren't my costumes clean? So something like that, knowing that, as well as vaccines, really finding out what vaccines are required and what the costs are of the vaccines, so that some of them can be very expensive, to include that in your budget.
Yeah, was that around your tour to Rwanda?
Yeah, so for Rwanda, there were a number of vaccines. The four of the dancers had been there the year before, so they didn't need all of them. But I hadn't been there, and another four hadn't been there, so there were a lot. And also sometimes they're hard to get last minute, so we had to plan ahead of time.
Yeah, thank you. Those are all really great recommendations of ways to be prepared, and for those kind of unexpected things, because you never know when a medical emergency might come up, but also the basics of making sure people can dance in recently washed costumes. Um,
I guess also one other thing I would add to that is, well,
yeah,
as a company, when you travel with people within, our own dancers, is to explain to them and have an open dialogue with them to make sure that they're equally as flexible. Because I don't travel with a company manager or somebody who's going to do laundry immediately after a performance. And as Ariel put said, you don't want to dance the next day in smelly stuff costume. So, I mean, how do you deal with that? Do you have dancers that are open enough and be responsible? And then, I've had to wash my own costume in a sink in my hotel rooms, and I've done that. And, are you traveling with people who are flexible and comfortable enough to help make the process easier and a wonderful experience? So these are the things that you might want to think about as well. And having that open dialogue in advance so dancers understand. So, this
This is
is
the
what,
expectation.
yeah.
Yeah.
right.
I think so
That's
much of it that I learned this last year was about communication. And, there's a lot of things that you don't know until you're faced with it. But exactly, like if I think that dancers get uncomfortable when something happens they're not expecting, which is going to happen regardless when you're on tour. But as much as you can say, okay, here, the expectation that we have is that you're going to wash your own clothes. We can provide you with, um, detergent. They also have these strips that are not liquid, so you can travel with them. Um, but it just helps so they can plan. Like some people really need to like have a schedule for their day because they need 4 hours to get ready because they're maybe 40 years old and have to do a really long warm up. I'm not exaggerating, to get ready to perform. And so if they need to do their laundry, they have to plan for that day.
And I found that once they know,
Yeah,
it's much more acceptable. They understand that. But you have to know your company. You have to know
right.
who you have in your company. So,
Yeah. I also think something that happened was like taxis or transportation. There were some places where it was really hard to get around if they don't, if some of them didn't have public transportation. And I think we were in Barcelona and you're only allowed four to a cab. And so if there were like six of us going somewhere, we had to get two cabs. And so one of the dancers would have to pay for it, and it was fine. But like if we had said, you have to cover, like, can you please cover this and I'm going to reimburse you, or here's a fund that we're going to work from. Again, it's just sort of that expectation of flexibility that you have to sort of continuously reinforce.
and the key thing is, especially when you're in a foreign country in a country that is very conservative, safety safety in numbers because you have to really stay together. Um, because things can happen.
Yeah. It's funny. There
Mhm.
was like one time where I found myself walking and I was like, I shouldn't have done that. Remember, don't do that. But yeah, and you feel sort of like you're babysitting in a way, like to reinforce these, but it is important and for everyone to be in communication with each other if they are going to leave the group. Okay, where are you going when you're coming back?
Yeah, you can have a group chat where,
Yeah.
will tell you who they are, where they are, who they're going to be with, and therefore you know exactly where everybody's going to be. It's not like you know,
10 p.m.
but it's nice to have that kind of conversation. So people are, especially as a director, you are essentially responsible for these people. So knowing where they are is essential.
Yeah.
Thank you both for all of that very kind of in the weeds, but vital recommendations on how to prepare for anything that could happen on an international tour. I want to pivot us in a new direction, but first want to just raise that Danae dropped in the chat a link to an access guide that Access Dance, I believe, has put together, and so yeah, just want to highlight that and thank you for sharing that resource, Danae. Um, so you've both shared how you first started touring internationally, but could you tell us what practices you maintain to ensure that international invitations keep coming your way? I know, Gaspard, you already mentioned that, kind of once you perform abroad, there you can make connections with other presenters and folks who are there, but is that the primary way that you both see your international touring being sustained? Or are there other things that you make sure to to have happen every year so that you are continually making and sustaining those relationships?
Well, you just said it right there. It's maintaining relationships for me, not only abroad, but also here. If you want to perform as a company, it's you have to you're gonna have 100 no's before you get one yes. So you have to learn to have a thick skin so that when somebody tells you no, that's not the end. I remember, I mean, I ended up going to Tbilisi at the last minute um, when we were supposed to go, I believe, to Armenia, Croatia, and then I think the funding from for Croatia I fell through. We got some funding from the U.S. Embassy to do uh, our Armenia. Just it was 3 weeks before we traveled, and I just remember I had made a contact when I was in Russia, so I decided to like pull my Rolodex and like send an email and say, hey, I'm going to be in Armenia. Um, we would love to know if it's possible for us to, um, come over if you have the capacity to for us to do a show there. And we had we already had the funding from the U.S. Embassy, so all I needed was housing for the dancers. And sure enough, I said yes. And so it's just kind of like maintain that contact and constantly sending stuff out and let them know what you're doing if you're going to be in the area. And then you ask them if they know other presenters in the area that might be open to who have the capacity to have an extra performers group coming to perform. So it's
Yeah.
just maintain constant contact.
And that was an embassy contact that you were reaching out to in Russia or a presenter?
That was from my own.
Okay.
I've applied for funding from the embassy, but those contacts were mine. Some I've developed over the years through ADF, through other countries that I've performed and maintained that, especially in Eastern Europe, because a lot of them they have this network. And so once you make one contact, you could pretty much sort of kind of like, scan the room and then try to get in touch with others and then ask the same of these presenters that may have other contacts they may connection to. So, which is kind of like what happened with me.
Yeah. I would just add in there that those embassy contacts are very important to maintain relationships with too, especially if you have a good experience working with someone at an embassy. That because the State Department is shuffling folks kind of from embassy to embassy every couple of years, someone that you had a good experience with in Armenia might be positioned in Burkina Faso in a couple of years. And like, if you maintain that relationship, they may be able to, work with you to create an opportunity in a different part of the globe. So yeah, just another point for maintaining those relationships is huge. Ariel?
I took a few notes when you told us what you were talking about, and I have relationships in capital letters. I think, as Gaspard said, it's really the most important thing, and not only showing, gratitude and respect wherever we go, but having the dancers do that as well. And I mean, there it can be very frustrating when you don't speak the same language, and you're going into a theater and you have very little time to set the piece for that performance. But I've also really, this last year, have been thinking about how sometimes we're invited to come to a theater and they're producing us, and sometimes we are producing ourselves. And that relationship needs to build in order for them to get to know us and see our work. And then this year there were a number of places that were like, we want you to come back and we want you to do more than one workshop. We want you to do, a whole week of workshops. Or it's so different when they see you in person, and them knowing that we're working together to try to get people in the audience and to try to get the community involved as much as possible. That you're not just there and gone. I think that I got some feedback about, how meaningful it was that we were interested in the community and not just there to show our work, but that we were there to build relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of building off from there, I'm wondering if you're willing to share a few resources. Are there specific festivals, showcases, marketplaces, or online communities even where you would recommend that US dance makers looking for that first international opportunity should start? Like, where can people begin building these relationships?
I would say High Fest, which is in Armenia, and then this is where I would have been right this very moment had it not been for the what's happening with the in our current government. I mean, so we were supposed to be in Armenia uh, this week for the next for 2 weeks. So High Fest is one of the leading dance festival in Armenia. So they're very, very generous and kind and open to American performers. Only problem is they do not have the money to bring US companies over because it's too expensive. And you'll find a lot of other companies there um, because they've been supported by their government. Whereas for us here in the US, it's tough. If you don't have, like, I've had funding from Mid-Atlantics in conjunction with other private foundations that enabled me to get there because I have it's 10 of us that travel. So you're looking at 8 dancers, myself, plus my lighting designer guy, and you're looking at $20,000 to get there round trip, plus housing, plus per diem. Um, so some of these festivals, they do not have the capacity financially to bring US companies. So if you have the funding to go there, they will be more than happy to receive you and give you a platform.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Gaspard, because I think expecting to get a grant that's going to cover all of the costs, in my experience, is unreasonable. And like, obviously that's a goal, but I mean, if you think about, major companies, still they have major donors who are supporting them, and that's how they exist. So, figuring out a way, and maybe you bring less dancers the first few times. I think we did one festival a long time ago in California where we just had 2 dancers go, and I didn't go, and they stayed. It was a very short trip. They went for like 2 nights or something, but we got out there and they got the experience, and we got to say that we went to California. Um,
Yeah, that was my experience too when we went to South Korea. So I sent 4 dancers there. So, kept the rest here in North Carolina with myself. I didn't go. And then I've applied Um, well, if you can apply for funding from the U.S. embassies, whichever country that you want to go to, however, you have to have an invitation from one of these organizations from these festivals. And oftentimes, if they know that the US will fund it, they will give you the invitation. All they need is the letter, as long as they cover maybe some housing as well as some per diem. So they need to be invested somewhere in a way. So that way it's not 100% free.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I would say also some other festivals that we participated in, the Lugumutu Festival in Rwanda, we made so many contacts there. Um, Again, we'd have to, I forget exactly where some of them were. They were like, we have a festival here, you should come, you should come. We're like, oh, like, there's no way we can. Yes, that one. But that was a really incredible festival with people all over the world. There are a lot of African countries, but also some other countries were brought there. And everyone is just so hungry to collaborate and learn from each other. Um, there's a few more. Maybe we can make a list and like share it. That would be a good idea.
We definitely can. I would just add to that Mid-Atlantic, we run the U.S. Artists International Grant Program, which we just announced yesterday. It does have funding from the National Endowment for the Arts again. Yay. But we have a resource on our website that lists international festivals. So for folks willing to do the deep digging and research and cold emailing, that's certainly possible. But yeah, if we want to kind of workshop a list of recommended places. You can also look and see who's gotten grants recently and where have they gone. And so that too kind of gives you an idea of recent festivals who've been booking American artists that might be interested in work, especially if the artist they booked is doing work that's similar to your own.
Yep, I will also mention one of the funders in the past for me is TMU, Trust for Mutual Understanding. They're very big on helping US artists to go to all these Eastern European countries to help spread the arts. So you may look into their website so for potential applications. And as long as you have an invitation letter from one of these countries, then they certainly are very open to helping you get there.
Thank you both. I want to move now into kind of the why of it all. We've talked a lot about the hardships, the difficulty of international touring. Like this is really hard to do. So, kind of what is it that keeps you coming back to international touring? Can you share an example of how international touring has tangibly impacted your goals, your company culture, your programming? What is it about touring that internationally that's like so exciting to you?
Well, for me, it's no mystery. I'm an emerging company. I still consider myself an emerging company. So wherever I can get a gig, I'm going. I don't discriminate. So, um, I've been lucky enough to by making one contact internationally, so it's kind of spread out, and then it's so kind of like it's a domino effect for me. It's been like that for me. So except for this year because of what's the situation now that I'm not overseas, but hopefully we'll see if it's gonna take the next 3 years of not traveling or is it gonna change next year. Um, it's just a matter of wherever I can get the gig, I go for it. And I'm constantly having to research certain festivals and then and also funding. So you can get, all this festival, a lot of them internationally will be open to you as long as you're able to get yourself there, which is the main thing. It's being able to raise the money to get there. The hardest thing is the travel, is the flights. And then if you're a small company, it may be easier. But if you're a group of 8, 10, it gets harder.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things. I think connecting with people around the world through movement is like so rewarding, so incredibly rewarding. Especially when there's so much craziness going on around you that you're able to connect on that very basic level, um, and have conversations with people, even though you don't really have a lot of words that are that you can understand. You can see that you're making an impact, um, and that you're helping. I think that's one of the things that I struggle with so much as an artist is why do I do this? Why am I doing this? Am I helping anybody? Am I doing anything for the world? And you're sort of like when someone comes up to you who looks nothing like you, and they say, wow, your work, I saw myself in your work. It really meant something to me. It's, for me, that's like the most rewarding experience. And I think also for the dancers, like being able to travel together and know each other as humans makes the performing so rich. Who you are, I mean, in my work, who you are is really important to what you bring to the stage. So being able to trust each other and connect with each other, as people makes a really informs what the performance is like. And I think for myself also being able to trust them and see them in this other way and is inspiring to create. Um, in terms of like the funding for it, it's sort of, like the chicken and the egg. When you tell people, when I've told people, oh, we've done this tour, they're really impressed. And I think grants and venues are more interested in us because we've already done some of the touring, because we've already had those experiences. So even though it might be really hard in the beginning to get the funding to do it, and you feel like, well, people have always told me like, oh, if you can say, well, I don't know if I've done this, I don't know, but to say, we're going to be at the place in London, but let's say I wasn't going to be in the place. If I reached out to a theater there and be like, I'm going to be in London in July, so we were wondering if we could do this performance. I mean, you're not lying necessarily, but like put yourself there, and say, but it is great that I'm going to be there. So how do we make this connection? Can we do something else? They don't feel like they have to really, there's like a pressure if you're the only reason why they're coming. Yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense, but yeah, definitely having more experiences under your belt just leads to more experiences.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I feel like what you were getting at there too also leads into another question of when you are putting together a tour, like obviously it's great to have one festival to go and perform at, and that's going to be an incredible experience. But you've covered those that, 15, $20,000 in flights for the company. Like you don't want to just go there and come back. So how have you had success in building on additional engagements beyond whatever that kind of initial date was abroad? And how do you go about adding on additional performances to flesh out a tour?
Well, that's one other thing I had mentioned earlier when I went to Armenia after I lost a gig in Croatia for funding because I think the festival had to shut down because the entire uh, fall season was completely shut down. And which is when I had that connection that was way back, and I reached out, and just so happened that they had an opening. And from there, we were because it would be. I always try to do multiple stops as opposed to spend $20,000 on a flight, go there for like 3 days, and then that's it. So every time that I know that I'm gonna go to a place like in Eastern Europe, I always try to map out other stations that I would love to go to. And and sometimes, you may be lucky. Up to this, but I've been pretty lucky, so that I was able to do multiple performances and not just go in one spot and then come back 3 days later. So that's why having those relationships and invite some of the presenters in the surrounding areas to come to the performance, a lot of the time because they're so interconnected, they would come. And so that's what I'm doing every time I'm performing there. So I'm always, okay, invite 10 other people from that area. Hey, I'm going to be there performing. And do you know any other presenters that might be able to have me come and do a workshop? I can send some of the dancers to do workshops. And because the stuff that we teach is very accessible, it's creative movement, and then people love that. And so,
Yeah, I would say similarly, the first tour that we did to Istanbul, we did, I think, 2 days of workshops at a dance school that we found on our own. I think we asked the festival to help connect us. Um, and maybe I think that there was one before the performance, then one after the performance would also help bring audience. And then the festival connected us with a university that was actually on the Africa side of Turkey. Um, and we did like a mini performance for them there. So like I sort of was like, we're gonna go all the way there and just do one performance. And it wasn't in theater, it was in a like a community room, but at least the people we were teaching got to see a performance aspect while we were also teaching them rep from the work. So that's one thing. And the way we're really building it out right now is that we have one or two set performances that we know about, and then how can we connect them once we're already there, and really trying to do education. Because a lot of schools will also give you a fee, and that sort of helps pay for some stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both for sharing that. Before we move away from the kind of advice section, just want to give an opportunity. Like, are there any other practical pieces of advice that you would give to artists interested in touring internationally? Is this something you really wish someone told you before that first trip to Turkey? Someone sat you down and said, Ariel, Gaspard, this is something you absolutely need to keep in mind before your first international tour. Just if anything comes to mind of those kind of practical lessons that you've learned over the years.
We've always had like a really detailed schedule. And I think making sure to designate time that is not the company time. So here is like 2 days where you can do whatever you want. So that the pressure's off of you to plan everything. I mean, there's going to be down days, and sometimes you might want to plan something together, but you don't have to necessarily all be together the whole time, but really to be clear about when those are so that dancers can plan around that. Um, that's something. And also, I was going to say, like my dancers share a room, but some people are like, I'll sleep anywhere, I'll sleep on the floor. I mean, we don't want them sleeping on the floor, but the hotel rooms get really expensive, or the Airbnbs can get expensive. But asking dancers who they're comfortable sharing a room with, doing some sort of anonymous survey, and then trying to pair people together, making sure everyone has a bed. It makes a big difference so that people are comfortable while they're away from home.
what was your question? What practical advice?
Yeah, yeah.
I would say, be sure you have a strong partner in the country that you're going to be. Um, do your homework, ask questions, lots of questions to the answer that you want to know before you get there, like housing, per diem, text, schedule, transportation, you know, and be ready for the unexpected.
Great. Okay. So I think I'm going to try and get one or two last quick questions in here before we pivot to the Q&A. I know we've got a couple questions already dropping in the chat, but if you've got questions that you'd like to ask, please start thinking about that and either typing them in the chat or being ready to come off of mute and ask those directly. But we've hit on this question a little bit already, but how do you balance the business and logistical realities of international touring with your creative vision or process, kind of being the artistic director of your company? Like that's a lot for any one person to do. How do you find yourself trying to balance that is maybe the better way to put it.
Well, for me, I have an angel called Victoria Gentutian. So it is hard. wearing several hats as a rehearsal director, as a founder, artistic director, and I'm always the last one to get paid if there's anything left, as many of you may be aware of. Um, so it's hard. It's hard, and having the right support system certainly help relieve a lot of the pressure. Um, so it's I'm now getting the support from a nice group of people that are supporting me right now. But in the beginning, it was really, really hard. Not that it's not any harder, but it's just help alleviate some of the pain that I would have to go, especially through my season right now. So I have so many things that are going on all at once. And I've been up since 3 o'clock trying to catch up. And so, um, you know, hopefully I can go to bed by 8 o'clock tonight, but we'll see.
We'll try and wrap this up early for you. So, what about you, Ariel?
I have I've gone through a few different iterations of how it looks. Right now, I have a company manager who's working about 25 hours a week, and I have a really strong board. And I have a dancer who's also a board member who's been with me so we've known each other for like 20 years. And she's really imperative for getting anything done. Again, it's like sort of like an angel, like, okay, someone to bounce ideas off of. I don't like working alone, as much as I like creating alone, and I don't mind sitting at a computer alone, but I don't like having a final product or answer for anything without someone reading the grant or a donor proposal. I don't think it's smart to do it on your own. So having someone that you trust to do that. Asking people for help is really hard, but I've found that people are almost more often honored that you're asking for help than annoyed by it. And my sister, who's was in development, told me, if you don't ask, they probably won't do it. So let them say no. Um, and you can hear no over and over again. But unless it's like a hard no, like it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen ever. And I will ask. I feel like Gaspard and I were talking about American Dance Festival before, and Jody, who's wonderful, and I've said to her, like, is this a hard no, or is this like keep me in the loop thing? She's like, it's a keep me in the loop, and I'm like, okay, so because I want to know, I don't want to annoy you. I'm annoying enough as a human. Like I'll do what I have to do, but um being as
That's
honest as possible with those relationships is really important.
that's something she tells me as well. You have to keep, updating whoever that you're
Yeah.
coordinating with, the presenters. So I'm constantly, sending them updates, and that's the only way they get to know you. Otherwise, there are so many other companies that are vying for their attention. So whoever's constant, that's who they're going to remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's all about communication, like we said earlier. So,
Persistent, persistent, persistent.
yes.
But I think also, I mean, I don't know you guys Bard well at all, but like I can also already tell from your energy, like people want to work with kind people.
Mm.
Agreed. Agreed.
And I mean, I'm a kind person, so it's a little bit, and I also humble to an extent. Like, no matter, can't imagine like, no matter what I get, I'm still gonna get no's. I'm still gonna get a lot of no's, and I still have two children that tell me no every day. So, like, I don't expect anyone to just hand me anything, and I think that goes a long way. Um, and just people want to work with people who are easy to work with.
For me,
Absolutely.
I don't turn myself down. I make you turn me down. So it's your responsibility to turn me down. Maybe I can catch you at the right time.
Right. That's smart.
So,
Well, I do think we can wrap up this portion of the call. I just want to thank you both so much for sharing all these insights and stories from your most recent couple of years of touring internationally. It really is a huge undertaking, both organizing and carrying out that first tour, and then finding the space and time to continue creating connections that can take you abroad. So I want to move us down to the question and answer portion of the call. If you have a question and don't mind unmuting and being on the video, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you in a second here. Otherwise, I know we've got at least one or two questions in the chat already. So let's start with a question from Brian from a little bit ago. Do you recommend agents or managers?
It depends. It depends. For me, I've tried having an agent. Uh, it looks like I knew more of the people she knew, and then I didn't understand why I was, paying a retaining fee when I knew more. So, and I wasn't getting much. So I decided to be my own agent, and so I've been doing it like that myself. So I spent 2 years or 3 years with an agent, and I wasn't really getting much. I'm not saying it doesn't work for everybody, because the agent that you have, make sure that they truly believe in you and your work. Because sometimes you may have somebody that just, had their own agenda, who just want to make some money and not really believing in what you have to offer. I've seen it, and I decided, well, I can be my own agent, and it's been working for me that way. But I don't know. It all depends. So
Agree. I sort of gave up on that. Not in like if an agent approached me, I would feel very differently about it maybe at this point. Because it would help a lot if someone was sort of getting the jobs for us. But that's not something that I'm thinking about right now. I think like really a lot of the time that people want to know the artistic director, choreographer, and as much as they may have a relationship with the agents, um, it's helpful if you can be your own voice.
and
I, go ahead.
I'm also in a better position where I could actually interview agents, because if they come and want to be and represent me, and I want to know why, what about my work that appeals to you? Because you have to make sure that the person who's going to represent you really truly have you at heart.
Right.
Uh,
Right. I do want to mention, I forgot to mention this, that um, after the first year that we did the Istanbul Festival, after that, we toured for 3 years with another company that was based in Paris, another woman. And that she did a lot of the planning
mm,
with us, but and we shared the program. So that cut some of the stress and the costs around the theaters, and also having someone on the ground in Europe who spoke Spanish fluently, spoke French fluently. So sometimes, I mean, when I first started having a company, however many years ago, I split a bill. I split a bill with at least one other company. And now for the last number of years, I don't do that anymore. But it's not a bad idea, I think, to sort of get your name out there. So you're not responsible for everything.
Yeah, that's a really unique way of touring internationally. Great to have that type of partnership to sustain multiple years of touring.
Yeah.
In the chat, we have a question from Lynn, and then we'll get to you, John. I see your hand. Lynn asks, were the company fees agreed to in advance of the tour, or were they based on percent of the house?
Ahead of time.
Flat fees ahead of time?
Flat fees, yeah.
Yep.
Flat fee, per diem, all that stuff was just ahead of time.
And in my case, for the some of the festivals that I go to, with support from TMU or Mid-Atlantic, so kind of make sure that the dancers are paid. And then a lot of these festivals, they have very, very limited budget. And so it's hard for them to, pay particularly US artists and anything. And so it'd be like if you get like a 3 nights or maybe partial per diem, because they're accustomed to paying their European dancers $20 per diem. then when I'm paying my dancers $60 versus $20. So I have to make up for that. So get the $20 from the festival plus the additional $40 from maybe if it's Mid-Atlantic or from the US Embassy, wherever I can get the grant from to supplement. Yeah.
Yeah, great point. John, if you don't mind coming off mute.
Hello, everyone. So glad to be part of this. I see a lot of familiar names here. I just want to back to the agent question and comment. I agree wholeheartedly. We're on our fourth agent now. Trying to see if it's worth it for all the reasons that you said. But I do want to, on the other side of things, not to just completely forget about what they could offer, especially internationally. So we have been privileged and lucky to have one international agent since 2014
Mm.
who brings us to Europe every 2 years. And those are fully funded, fully paid bookings, just like you would get here. And no grants, no nothing like that. It's just an agent that books American dance. And they bring in two American dance companies every year. And so there are, especially internationally, agents that do that and they get the bookings and they pay you. You don't have to do anything. They just pay you, just like a booking should be. So when it comes, but they won't touch festivals, because there's no money in festivals. So it's all I'm saying is that just weigh all the options first. The agents in America also won't touch festivals, especially international, because there's no money. So they're not going to help you with that. But there are agents overseas, and I will write our European agent in the chat because you all should absolutely look them up. That do it the right way. It's just really weeding out the ones that aren't. And again, I'm not talking about festivals. I'm talking about, full tours. We go on tour anywhere from 3 weeks to 9 weeks every 2 years through this agent, fully paid for. So that's it. You know,
No,
I,
That's amazing.
yeah,
yeah. It's
that's
it's tough. It's there's like we all know there's like five decent agents in the United States that know how to do dance, and like you said, like do you want to be on a roster full of 10 other dance companies and you're not getting that personal attention? That's what we're going through right now here in the States. But this European agent it's the complete opposite. So it pays to research them. I'm going to write them in the chat right now.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate you bringing that kind of viewpoint and nuance to that discussion too. Because, right, obviously the fit between the artist and the agent is so important and making sure that that relationship is working for everybody. And great to hear that you've had such a wonderful experience with that European agent.
Thank you all.
All right. Well, then we might be coming to the end of our questions. So I just want to thank everybody for attending this session.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you, Ariel and Gaspard. It's been great having you. Let me